The urn was silver, polished so bright it almost glowed under the cathedral lights. Everyone else seemed to be watching it like it was some sacred relic, but I couldn't stop staring at the row of medals laid out beneath it. Every one of them had a story my father never told me. My name is Natalie Walker. I'm 34 years old. I live in Columbia, South Carolina, and I just buried my father, Colonel Raymond Walker, retired, decorated, and now, dead. I sat stiffly in the front row of the cathedral, hands folded, spine straight, just like I had been taught. My black dress itched at the collar. The pews were filled with people in uniform, their faces solemn, their backs unnaturally straight. High-ranking officers, family friends, local politicians, all of them there to honor the man who raised me like a stranger. And right beside me, with a medal pinned to his chest and a composed half-smile, was my twin brother, Felix. People kept walking up to him, hands on his shoulder, low words of admiration, condolences. "Your father was a hero," one of them whispered. "He'd be proud of the man you've become." They barely looked at me. Felix stood when it was time, buttoned his jacket like he was about to command a battalion, and stepped to the podium. His voice was smooth, familiar, and controlled, too controlled. He told stories about our father's courage, his discipline, his unwavering dedication. And then, just before he ended, he wiped the corner of his eye with the back of his hand. Perfect timing. The room was still, moved. Reverend nodded. One of the colonels whispered, "What a strong young man." I didn't move. I'd heard that speech before. Felix used it at a ROTC event in college. Swapped out a few details and polished it for maximum impact. Our father always said Felix was a natural leader. A true walker, he'd say. Not like me, I was the resilient one. When the service ended, I stayed behind while everyone filtered out. My fingers brushed the edge of the program, but I didn't look at it. I already knew what it said: Felix's bio, his service rank, his accolades. Not a mention of me. At the legal office, it was all dark wood and tight air. We sat across from each other, me, Felix, and the family attorney, Mr. Landry, who had worked with Dad for years. He cleared his throat like he was preparing to deliver a war strategy. Colonel Walker's estate, as detailed in his most recent will, will be passed entirely to his son, Felix Walker. He slid an envelope across the table toward me. "Natalie, your father left you a personal letter." I didn't touch it. My heart thudded in my ears. Landry went on. The colonel wrote, and I quote, "Natalie has always been self-sufficient. I know she will thrive without assistance." I heard Felix's soft exhale, like this was expected. Maybe it was. I opened the envelope with steady hands. Just a few lines, typed neatly. No warmth, no apology, just that same phrase. Self-sufficient. Like it was a compliment. I stood up, smoothed my dress. "I appreciate the clarity," I said, voice calm. Felix looked at me, almost surprised, like he expected a scene. But there wasn't going to be one. Not here. I didn't throw the letter. I didn't raise my voice. I just walked out of that office with a polite nod and a blank expression. They thought I'd move on. That I'd accept it. That I'd play my role again, the quiet, overlooked twin. They didn't know what I was already planning. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who doesn't say a word. When people hear military family, they picture folded flags, rigid discipline, maybe a golden retriever in the yard. But in our house, it was medals on the wall, a schedule taped to the fridge, and a rule: never outshine Felix. Growing up, the difference was subtle at first. Felix got a B in math? Dad would slap him on the back and say, "Solid effort, son." I got an A+ in science and a regional prize for my volcano project. Dad told me to clean the garage because no one likes a bragger. At the time, I didn't even realize it was favoritism. I thought maybe it was just how things were. I worked hard, harder than anyone. Honor roll every year, science fairs, student council, but the more I did, the more invisible I became. Felix was average, but he had charm. He had Dad's jawline, his easy way with people, and more than once I heard Dad say, "He's a walker through and through." As for me, I was just the other one. When Felix turned 17, he took Dad's old Chevy for a joyride and crashed it into a mailbox. He wasn't hurt, but the car was. I still remember the way Dad crouched down beside him on the curb, checking him for bruises like he was some kind of war hero. A week later, a new truck showed up in the driveway. That same year, I lost my college scholarship because I couldn't get time off from my overnight shift at a gas station. I told Dad, thinking he'd finally understand how hard I was trying. He just shook his head and said, "You should have planned better." They never asked me what I wanted to be. Never sat down and talked about schools or goals. They assumed I'd figure it out, and I did. I worked graveyards at the diner, cleaned motel rooms, ran cable lines on weekends. Anything that paid. I pushed through community college and got into Clemson's software engineering program with nothing but sweat and late nights. I didn't expect applause. I just wanted acknowledgement. I never got it. Back in my apartment, I sat on the couch with the letter in my hands, the one from Dad, the one that called me self-sufficient. I read it again, slower this time. Each word felt like a bruise. No apology, no affection, just this dry, condescending seal of approval for surviving without him. I stared at that last line for a long time. You've always been self-sufficient. Then I stood up, walked to the kitchen sink, and held the letter over the flame from the stove's burner. It caught quick, curling, blackening, gone. That was the thing about growing up ignored. It teaches you how to endure, but it also teaches you how to plan without anyone noticing. They thought I'd take this lying down. They forgot who they raised. The cabin smelled like old coffee and cedar. Same as always. My father used to come here to reset, as he called it, which really meant escape, from Mom, from decisions, from anything he didn't want to deal with, including me. I told Felix the first was coming to pick up a few keepsakes. Just some photo albums and maybe his old compass, I had said on the phone. He didn't argue. Of course he didn't. He probably assumed I'd take a few dusty books and leave quietly like I always did. I parked my car around back, out of sight, and let myself in with the key still taped under the flower pot. That was so like him, obsessive with protocol, but lazy with security. Inside, everything was exactly how he'd left it. His flannel jacket still hung on the hook. The stack of field manuals sat neatly on the side table. The fireplace was clean. Probably Felix had someone come scrub it before the service. He always liked appearances. I walked slowly, trailing my fingers across the dusty banister. In the study, behind a portrait of him in uniform, was the safe. I didn't expect it to open, but it did. No code, no key, just slightly ajar, like someone had already been in it and hadn't bothered to lock it again. Inside were the usual things: a worn passport, some old dog tags, a sealed envelope with military pension info. And then, behind a leather-bound notebook, I saw it. A copy of the will. Not the one read at the attorney's office. This one was older, dated just over a year ago. My name was right there, next to Felix's. 50-50. Equal shares. No letter, no footnotes, no self-sufficient excuses. Just a clean, even split. My breath caught. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the paper, trying to process it. It wasn't about the money, not entirely. It was about what this proved. That at one point, my father meant to treat me like I mattered. That I wasn't just some background character in his perfect image of family. That's when I heard the footsteps. I turned slowly. Felix stood in the doorway, arms crossed, dressed too neatly for someone who claimed he hadn't been sleeping. His expression gave away nothing, but the fact that he didn't ask what I was doing told me everything. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said flatly. I didn't respond. He stepped into the room, eyes on the will in my hand. He changed it. Near the end. Said it would be less complicated this way. He didn't want fighting, you know? I raised an eyebrow. So you helped simplify it for him. Felix sighed, like he was the one who'd been wronged. Come on, Nat. You don't need this. You've got your career, your own place. Dad came around eventually, but he didn't want legal chaos. Legal chaos. That's what he called theft now. I slid the older will between my jacket and my back, careful not to fold it. Felix didn't notice, or pretended not to. Sure, I said, calm as ever. No chaos. I walked past him without another word. Out the door, into my car, heart pounding but hand steady. Felix thought the conversation was over, but for me, it had just begun. The war hadn't started in that study, but it sure as hell found its first piece of ammunition there. And I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to win. I found Sabrina through her Instagram. Not her main one, the mom life account filled with filtered brunches and beach days, but her second one. The private profile where the captions were sharper, the smiles more forced. She hadn't posted since March, but I saw what I needed. There were cracks. Sabrina used to be a broadcast journalist, back when she still wore her hair in a pixie cut and spoke with purpose. Now she was a lifestyle brand. Wellness partnerships, product placements, sponsored content for juice cleanses she probably never drank. Felix liked that version of her, pretty, polished, presentable. I messaged her from a burner account and set up a meeting at a quiet coffee shop across town, the kind where no one recognized anyone and the Wi-Fi never worked. She arrived 10 minutes late in oversized sunglasses, holding a paper cup like it was a shield. Her fingers were bare. I noticed the missing wedding ring immediately. She sat across from me, eyes guarded. You said you had something important? I nodded. I do. But first, I need to know something. Is Felix still controlling your accounts? That hit. A tiny flinch. She looked away. I don't know what you're talking about, she said carefully. Yes, you do, I said, calm. Because he did the same thing to Dad's estate. And I'm guessing you've seen some things you weren't supposed to. Another pause. Then, why are you doing this now? I reached into my bag and slid a photo across the table. It was a printed copy of the old will, the one that gave me half. Her eyes scanned it. She didn't say anything, but I saw her jaw tighten. Because I'm tired of being erased, I said. And I think you are too. Sabrina hesitated, then pulled out her phone, tapped a few times. If I send you something, you keep me out of it? I'm not here to burn your life down, I said. Just his. That got a ghost of a smile. She forwarded me 2 email threads. One with suspicious transfers tied to the estate sale. The other, an itinerary for a consulting trip to Miami, booked under Felix's name, with a guest ticket for someone named Clarissa Harper. No last name on the itinerary, but a quick reverse image search later would show me everything I needed. She took a sip of her coffee. You're not going to court? Not yet, I said. Right now, I need leverage. She looked at me for a long moment. Then you're going to need this too. She scrolled to a voice memo and hit play. Felix's voice, clear as day. Sabrina, I'm telling you, Natalie doesn't need it. She's not going to do anything with the ranch. She never even cared about Dad's legacy. I smiled. Thank you. She leaned back, tapping her nails against the paper cup. He thinks no one will ever touch him. I slipped my phone back in my purse. Then he's finally due for a surprise. When I walked out of that coffee shop, I didn't just have evidence. I had an inside source. And Felix? He had no idea that the next move wasn't legal. It was personal. The woman's name was Clarissa Harper, a real estate developer out of Naples who specialized in discrete property transitions for wealthy clients. She had been tagged in just 2 photos with Felix, both cropped carefully, both posted months apart, both with vague captions like working hard with the best. But Sabrina had sent me the itinerary and the forwarded emails. There were credit card charges to the same boutique hotel, spa appointments for 2, a bottle of $300 wine billed to the room. It was all there, just beneath the surface. I didn't need to imagine the affair. I had proof. Sabrina had been busy. She sent me bank statements, travel confirmations, even screen recordings of Felix's shared calendar, showing regular retreats that suspiciously matched Clarissa's travel dates. But the goldmine came in the form of one casual conversation she'd recorded on her phone, saved in a folder labeled insurance. She had confronted Felix once, quietly, after finding lipstick on a wine glass in his overnight bag. I'm handling business, Sabrina, he'd said, irritation simmering in his voice. Do you want me to take care of this estate or not? You're handling someone, she replied coldly. And it's not me. He didn't deny it. Not once. That clip, paired with the receipts, was enough. Enough to get him in trouble at home, but not just there. Felix had been appointed to the advisory board for the Legacy Military Trust my father set up, a fund that honored veterans with scholarships and financial support. His affair with a woman involved in the property sales surrounding that very trust was more than personal. It was unethical. I drafted an anonymous dossier. 62 pages. Photos, emails, screenshots, transaction records. I even clipped the audio file and included a transcript. No threats. No demands. Just a clean, professional package mailed directly to the oversight committee tied to the military trust. I didn't need to scream to make noise. I just had to let the right people read what Felix had done. And then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. 3 weeks after I sent the file, a quiet inquiry was opened. I knew because a contact of mine at the Department of Defense, a woman I'd helped build firewall software for, reached out through encrypted chat. You didn't hear this from me, but someone in your family might be under review soon. Possible ethics violations. A developer, funds tied to estate sales. Sound familiar? I thanked her and said nothing more. I didn't need updates. I could see the fallout on Felix's face. He called Sabrina first. She didn't answer. Then he called me. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. A few days later, I saw him at a community event, a fundraiser for veterans that our father's name was still proudly attached to. Felix looked off. Not the usual tailored, camera-ready version of himself. His tie was crooked. His eyes darted too much. His smile was too sharp. He worked the room like always, but people didn't lean in the same way anymore. They didn't laugh as quickly at his jokes. I saw one board member shake his hand without looking him in the eye. He was slipping. losing control. And I hadn't said a word. I stood at the back of the event, sipping a soda and watching it unfold. Nobody noticed me. Not at first. But someone eventually did, a young officer who asked what division I worked in. When I told him about my cybersecurity work for the Defense Department, he raised his eyebrows, impressed. "I've heard your name before," he said. "You worked on the encryption protocol, right?" I nodded. He grinned. "That was badass." It was the first time I'd ever been at one of these things and felt seen. Felix stumbled through a speech at the end. The applause was polite. And just like that, the first thread of his carefully woven image began to unravel. All I had to do now was keep pulling. It started with whispers. Felix's name stopped showing up in the Trust's press releases. The military scholarship site removed his photo from the advisory board page with no explanation. Someone on LinkedIn noticed and posted a vague status, disappointed in those who pretend to serve the legacy of veterans while serving only themselves. The comments were brutal. People read between lines quickly when they want to. A week later, it became official, administrative leave pending investigation. That's how the committee phrased it. But in our world, that was code for he's already sunk. Sabrina didn't wait for the investigation to finish. She filed for divorce with precision, quiet, swift, and devastating. No public fights. Just a single statement she posted on her influencer account. "After much reflection, I've decided to separate from Felix Walker. This decision comes after learning of certain moral failings and repeated breaches of trust. My priority now is my son and our peace." The post got over 20,000 likes. She moved to Florence, Italy for the summer. Her parents had a place there. One morning, I opened my inbox to find a photo of her and her son, Luca, smiling in front of the Duomo. No words. Just the image. Just the peace. Felix, meanwhile, was scrambling. I heard from a former colleague that he'd tried to get ahead of the fallout, emailing military partners, insisting the affair had no influence on the estate funds. But no one was buying it. Not when the documents said otherwise. He tried to hold on to the image. Showed up at a local gala in Charleston wearing his dress blues, trying to act like the walls weren't closing in. But they were. I was there, too, not by accident. It was a gala in honor of our father, after all. For the first time, I was invited as more than just Felix's sister. They asked me to speak on cybersecurity advances in protecting military infrastructure. My name was on the program. My table had a nameplate. People shook my hand, listened to me, asked questions. When Felix finally walked in, 40 minutes late, face pale, tie slightly loosened, no one stood up. A few nods. One firm handshake. That was it. He drifted in like an afterthought, trying to smile, but it didn't hold. Even our cousin Renee, who used to call him Commander Charm, barely gave him a look. After my panel talk, a retired general came up to me and said, "Your father would be proud. Not just of your work, but of your composure." I thanked him, then turned slightly, just enough to see Felix standing off to the side, pretending not to watch. His eyes met mine for half a second. I didn't look away. He used to shine in these rooms. Used to own them. Now he was just background. I didn't feel glee. Not exactly. But there was a satisfaction in it, watching the golden child dim under his own weight. Watching the world finally see what I had always known. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation. And I had just stepped into the light. I sat in the corner office of Reynolds and Klein, watching my attorney flip through the binder we'd assembled. Page after page of irrefutable proof, the original will, financial transfers, estate sale discrepancies, and Sabrina's sworn affidavit. Every piece locked in place. "You're sure you're ready for this?" my lawyer, Janine, asked, her voice steady but low. I nodded. He didn't leave me much choice. Janine tapped her pen on the folder. "This is airtight. He forged a change in a legal document, manipulated estate finances, and personally profited from the modification. That's will fraud. Plain and simple." The suit was filed that same afternoon. Felix's attorney called 2 days later, clearly trying to keep things quiet. The tone was clipped, bordering on desperation. "My client is open to discussing settlement." Of course he was. Felix didn't want this going to trial. Not after everything else, the trust inquiry, the divorce, the whispers at every veterans event. He couldn't survive public court testimony. And certainly not from Sabrina, who had already provided a detailed written statement and confirmed her willingness to appear if needed. We didn't even need to bluff. By the time the settlement was finalized, it included everything I had been denied: half the estate, full access to the financial records, and partial ownership of the Walker family ranch. The ranch wasn't worth much, but it meant something. It was where Dad used to take Felix every summer. Taught him to shoot, taught him to ride. I was never invited. Now, half of it was mine. Felix also lost administrative rights over the military legacy fund. Janine made sure of that. The court ordered an independent third party to oversee all veteran-related distributions from here on out. Felix didn't argue. He didn't even show up in person the day it was signed. I saw him one last time a week later. He called and asked to meet. No lawyers, no emails, just the two of us at a downtown cafe. I agreed. I wanted to see his face when it was done. He showed up in a plain gray sweater, no uniform, no performance. For once, he looked tired. I didn't want to fight you, he said, sitting across from me. You have to understand. I was trying to preserve what Dad wanted. I didn't blink. He wanted to give me half. That's what the will said. Felix looked away. He changed his mind. No, I said, firm but quiet. You did. He didn't answer. I stood up, collecting my bag. We're done here. As I turned to leave, he reached out instinctively, but I pulled away. I never wanted a war, Felix, I said. But you picked one the moment you decided I wasn't worth a fair share. His hand dropped to the table. I walked out, the bell above the cafe door chiming behind me. I didn't feel triumphant. Not really, but I did feel whole. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. The ranch was quiet when I arrived. Midday sun stretching shadows across the front porch, wind rustling through the brittle grass. Everything looked smaller than I remembered, the barn, the house, even the hills in the distance. Funny how childhood places shrink once you finally have power over them. I stood in the doorway of the barn, breathing in dust and old wood. This was where Dad taught Felix to shoot, summer after summer, boys-only weekends while I stayed home with Mom, stacking books and pretending I didn't care. I'd asked to come once. Dad said no. It's not your thing, he'd said. You wouldn't like it. He was wrong. About that. About a lot of things. I walked slowly around the property, letting the past stretch out around me like a worn-out film reel. All the memories that didn't include me. All the spaces I was told I didn't belong in, now mine, at least partly. But I wasn't going to keep it. 2 days later, I called a non-profit in Charleston that provided transitional housing and mental health support for female veterans. Told them I had land. Told them they could use it however they needed, farming therapy, weekend retreats, building cabins. No catch. No press release. Just, here, take it. Make something new. The woman on the phone cried. I didn't. The sale of the rest of the estate brought in enough to keep me comfortable. I didn't want a mansion. I didn't want headlines. I wanted peace. I found a small cabin outside Asheville, tucked between pines and fog, 5 miles from the coast. It had a wraparound porch and an old clawfoot tub, and the kitchen smelled like cedar when the windows were open. I planted tomatoes in the backyard, built shelves for my books. Hung a wind chime made of mismatched spoons on the back porch just because it made a nice sound. I started working remote again, light consulting, mostly for defense contractors. Not because I needed to, but because I still liked building things no one could break into. One morning, I opened the mailbox and found a letter. Italy postmark. Sabrina's handwriting. Inside, a photo of her and Luca standing on a sunny street, both of them grinning like kids who finally found freedom. Luca was holding a small ice cream cone and wearing a t-shirt that said, Team Mom. Below it, her handwriting. Thank you. For everything. You helped us both get out. I pinned it to the corkboard above my desk. Not because I needed the reminder, but because, sometimes, it's good to remember the difference between surviving and choosing. For years, I'd fought to be noticed. To be treated like I mattered. And now, for the first time, I wasn't chasing anything. I had silence. Space. A garden. And a life I didn't have to share with ghosts.